This volume for me has been really interesting, not just from a light novel standpoint, but also from an anime standpoint, and I will get into the anime standpoint very soon, because it's I would say, a group of different sort of mini stories which all just bundle together under a sort of a same timeline, and I really do love some of these stories. Some of these stories are just really heartwarming, have a lot of depth behind them. It opens up the characters in so many more ways, especially with Wealth, Lily, Sia. Sia by far is probably one of the really adorable, cute ones, but at the same time had me questioning a lot of different things, and I just am still questioning what is going on with Sia, what is going on with Freya. And then there's, of course, the Lily and the Mikado ones, which I don't think are as important in sticking to the timeline. If the anime ever decided to do like a small OVA or a episode in the between another season, if you get my hint of what's coming soon, I would really prefer, though, if they actually had an OVA for Wells' story, because Wells' story was very key to the timeline of this volume, while the others you could shuffle out of the timeline if you wanted to do an anime. And I'll get into why. Wells' story is very much baked on the war that's going on outside the gates. Wells is just doing his normal day-to-day stuff, and then he gets approached by his father, which, of course, his father and a bunch of troops have snuck into the city, and they are trying to convince him to come back home to his father and build magical swords again. And of course, Wells is not having a bar of that, but they are basically holding leverage over him, saying, well, if you don't do it, these bad things are going to happen. We're going to win this war. We're going to be back in our glory days, and we're going to get our name back and be the greatest, because we'll start making magic swords again. Basically, they're just trying to force him to make magic swords to restore their name. And this just goes down a very, I would say, steep path for Wealth, because Wealth is trying to overcome a lot of mental issues as well when it comes to the magic swords, and him trying to become a blacksmith that is renowned and respected for being good on his own merits, and not just because of the bloodline and the sort of the powers that are embedded in him because of that bloodline. He doesn't want to make magic swords because of the destruction and the hate that it has caused amongst other races, particularly, of course, the elves themselves. And that is understandable, but of course, there are people out there that are keeping an eye on him because they know the fact that, of course, Welf's father is lingering in the city, which of course is to do with Hephaestus. And the thing that I just really love is the amount of depth and meaning that goes into Welf. As much as he's a side character and not as many people care about him from an anime standpoint, I really love when minor side characters get the amount of depth that this gave to Welf. And it didn't just give some depth to Wealth, it also opened up the world itself outside of the city. It shows what's going on outside of the city, and to this day, instead of just going over the past, it goes over the present days as well. And it also goes over Hephaestus. And the chemistry between Wealth and Hephaestus is adorable, especially at the end where Hephaestus is basically saying, well, you know, I've got this thing over my eye, no one would love me if you saw what it was like. And then he pulls it off, hands it to her, says, nah, you're fine. And she just loses it, because the fact is, the reason why Hestia and Hephaestus are friends, which is actually mentioned in this chapter, which again opens up more backstory to other characters, is because Hestia knew what Hephaestus looked like, and Hestia didn't care. Hestia cared more about the merit of the character rather than the looks of a character when it comes to befriending them and being close to them or talking to them. And so Hephaestus became very close friends with Hestia because of how Hestia is. And Welf basically proved that he was similar in that merit, that he gave no tushes about her looks, but cared more about the passion behind her blacksmithing skill, just how strong and powerful she is as a woman, and he just is sort of taken back by the fact that she is just so amazing as a character. And I really love the amount of depth and meaning and character building that just went into Wealth in that chapter. That chapter for me is the main highlight for that volume, even though season 2 only took chapter 6, which was the end part, and skipped over basically 5 chapters. It took a little bit at the start just so it could set the stage, what the last 2 episodes of season 2 was meant to be about, and then it just took chapter 6 and that was the end of it, which is disappointing, because those other 5 chapters, as much as some of them aren't as important, I still found them really interesting. And it's a lot of a light novel to skip over as well. But other stuff that went on, of course, without harping too much about just Welf himself, is Lily proposal, because again, another member of another familiar decides to throw some interesting spanners in the works, which is Finn from the Loki familiar, and he decides to propose to Lily. And now there's a lot more of a complex reason behind that. It isn't just purely love at first sight, even though he is genuinely interested in Lily because of her strong characteristics and her courageousness, but that is another thing. He is looking for someone to help carry on the heir of his bloodline so that he can reinvigorate his race to be triumphant and strong again, like they used to be when they used to worship another particular goddess. So he's trying to basically be someone of great importance to rally and support his race and get them to move forward, because they'll have someone to look up to. And so he's trying to find someone that he can marry that can bring a child into the world that can also do something of similar ways and stimulate and invigorate the actual race as a whole to be more productive and more determined to sprout their wings and be more productive and stronger. And I do really love Finn for that. You really get to see an interesting side of Finn where you get to learn just how determined he is to help his race overall. He's very selfless. He's just trying his absolute hardest to better himself and better his race as a whole. There is definitely some love triangle stuff going on with that, where he gets into a little bit of strife with our lovely Amazon girls, particularly one that has a big crush on him. That comes in, and then of course Belle sort of throws a spanner in the works, and I can understand why Belle wants to interfere to a degree, because he doesn't want to lose his close friend, even though of course he's interested in another female. He just doesn't want to lose his close companions, and I think a part of him thinks that he's going to lose Lily to the Loki familiars if he allows this marriage to go on. But not just that, also being said, the little argument that went on between Lily and Belle just before all of this transpired is another deciding factor that why Lily was willing to go into it. Just before all these events played out, there was a bit of an argument of them discussing about who Belle had feelings for, and it came out to the other familiars that Belle has feelings for eyes, and it also came out as one of his big secrets that he has this particular ability that gives him exceptional growth because of his feelings towards eyes. And that is something that really kind of throws them in a bit of a headspin, because they've always wondered, how does he get so much power? Where's he getting all this power from? Like, it's just phenomenal. It's not normal. And so for Hestia to finally relinquish that knowledge to them and say, you know, you can't tell anyone else, Belle doesn't know, but this is why. He has really strong feelings for eyes, and that fuels this sort of passive ability that allows him to gain exceptional growth. And this does really, I would say, upset is the nice way to put it, Lily, because Lily has feelings for Belle. And so I think Lily, in a bit of a protest, kind of was like, well, you know what, fine, I'll take this marriage proposal, and then I'll run off Ravin, and then I'll live happily ever after. And I think it was just her being a little bit rebellious, but also angry at the fact that Belle had feelings for someone else. At the same time, I almost just feel like this is going to turn into a giant harem, which, to be honest, I don't think that that's a bad idea, honestly, with just how many girls he keeps winning, but again, that's a whole different topic for a different day. The other two chapters of importance, I would say, that are a little bit minor to me, but I still really enjoy, is the Mikado one, which is basically going over, again, some of Mikado's backstory. That is one thing you'll notice very quickly with each of these chapters, except for chapter 6, is it goes over a lot of the backstory of each of the characters. All of them actually have a lot of backstory and world building, but those 5 go over particular backstories for each of those major characters that are sort of the focus, which is why I really love these side stories, because it just delves deeper into each character individually that isn't as major. Instead of just going over Belle all the time, it dives into some of the minor characters. And with Mikado, it goes over her feelings towards her god, and just her trying to, I would say, get closer to her god. Even though, yes, she has joined Hestia, there is still that bond there, and Mikado definitely is a character that doesn't like the way her god does things, especially with how he interacts with other females. And there's this fun back and forth, and of course they're trying to set up a party because they're doing this whole sort of birthday thing for the god, even though it's not his birthday, kind of a congratulations for joining the lower planes kind of thing. It's almost like a birthday. It's being reborn into the lower world kind of thing, as much as it's not technically his birthday, but it is kind of the birthday of him being on that planet. So they do a celebration for that, but instead they throw it back onto Mikado and do a celebration for her farewell because of the fact that she's now joined the Hestia Familia, and so they're giving her a bit more of a farewell rather than it being about, of course, the god, even though she does end up making a cake for him, even though the one beforehand she threw in his face because he was flirting with other girls without knowing. So there is that. I think it's a very short but sweet little chapter that just goes over a bit more of the backstory. It goes over the interactions that happened before everything went on, how they met, how they interacted, how he used to be as well, how he hasn't really changed too much. And then of course he gives a gift to Mikado, which is dual blaze, and he gives one to her and says, here's one and I'll hold on to the other one until you come back and then you can have it. I was very interested in the reasoning why he got two and then held on to one and was like, well, when you come back then I'll give it to you. It's almost like, I almost wondered at the start if he was questioning if she'd ever come back. But I don't think that was the intention. I think it was just more of a, we'll give you this gift when you come back and then we can celebrate together. Kind of like a two pieces to a whole. And the last side story being about Sia. And Sia for me just ended up having more questions than ever been answered, especially with just the mysteries of it. I've always had this feeling that Sia has a connection with Freya, especially before this chapter because of all the little hints in there. But this one just opened up even more. I just am like, either it is Freya, but then I'm like, maybe it isn't Freya. Maybe it isn't Freya, but at the same time, there is just so many little hints that say that Sia has a connection to Freya. Again, there's so many little things that just seem to connect, and especially at the end of the chapter where Freya mentions about how she assigned someone to go protect her. It just, again, I have so many questions and I just don't know where to go from it, other than just the one lead would be Sia is Freya. But I just don't know, because there are so many things that say yes and there are so many things that kind of say no. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm really looking forward to getting deeper into the light novels to actually see if there's more pieces to that puzzle that I can find out. I'm just really excited about that because I love Sia. I think she's just absolutely adorable, but she's very clever as well. She's very cunning, very smart, can really dig into the minds of others, even gods themselves. And so I'm very interested to see where she goes. But basically her story is more about her working with an orphanage, her spending her free time helping those in less advantage, and Belle ends up following her due to the fact that he ends up bumping into her in the streets and is very curious because the bar themselves are going on and on and on about how she disappears, they don't know where she's going, and they wanted to hire Belle to go stalk her, but he ends up saying, no, alright, I won't do it, but then ends up doing it anyway. And that's where they end up spending some quality time together. And there is some good stuff in here, and this is where I really think Sia is Freya. Even though she says otherwise, there's this particular scene where she ends up getting Belle to lay on her lap and says, well, you know, you did it with eyes, so yeah. And then that's where I'm instantly like, well, how did you know about that? No one was there. And then she mentions, oh, well, you know, in the bar they mention it. And I'm like, I really don't think eyes would talk about that kind of thing in the bar. That would be too embarrassing, and it would end up aggravating the other Loki familiars, especially if she turned and said, oh, by the way, Loki, I've been getting very close with Belle, which is your rival because of Hestia. I don't think that would be the case. I think it's a good scapegoat and saying, yeah, I heard it in the bar. I just think Sia has some inside information that she's able to get and found out that there's this connection between Eyes and Belle, and so she's a little bit jealous. There's too many little hints. This one just, oh, I have to think about it more, but now I really want to dig into the light novels more to just see where that goes. But that story was really cute. I really feel like it's just something that really kind of brings them together and gives them a better understanding of each other, especially with the fact that Belle tries to protect her from an underground tunnel that leads into the Pleasure District, and he fails at it, but with the intervention of another familiar member from Freya, that ends up being defeated, and he ends up giving a bit of a stern jab at Belle, saying, you know, you're weak, you need to be stronger if you want to protect people, that kind of thing. And then the final chapter, which is the only chapter that is in the anime, so episodes 11 and 12, chapter 6 is the only chapter out of the light novels that is covered in season 2, which is disappointing. I can kind of see why the anime's done that. They've only taken the major key components from the light novel that they felt was important. Obviously, they don't feel like the other characters are of great importance. So for those that do want more story for the actual world itself, definitely read the light novels. And if you really don't want to read the previous stories, start from volume 8. That's only if you don't want to read from the previous. I still recommend reading from volume 1 onwards, because there's always attention to detail, there's little hints, Easter eggs, just little things always missing from the light novels in comparison to the anime. But this story is very much baked on this whole idea that, again, Hestia ends up getting kidnapped because of the war going on, and she's used as leverage to try and get wealth to join back again. That was the intention and the plan, but of course, that kind of backfires on them because Bell and Eyes decide to go and rescue Hestia, which Loki wasn't particularly fond of, because Loki was the one that was going to send Eyes out there, because of course, whether they're rivals or not, Loki needs to stop this war and needs to not allow this leverage to be used over them. So of course, Eyes gets sent out there. She's the fastest, but Bell wants to help, even though Loki's kind of like, you know, you're a bit slow, you're not going to be able to keep up. Eyes has faith, they end up catching up, they end up freeing Hestia, but due to bad circumstances, they fall down sort of like a canyon slash river. They end up getting badly sort of injured a little bit to a degree. Mainly Eyes is fine, but Belle and Hestia are basically in rough shape. More so Hestia is in the roughest shape. She ends up recovering. They end up resting in this lovely little town, which is protected by dragon scales, which again goes into even more backstory of the world itself, the different creatures, the mythological creatures, and just so much extra building on things that aren't necessarily baked in the dungeon and that particular city. And that's what I really love. I love when they go over things that aren't just in the same location. As much as I love the dungeon, I love the city itself, I really like learning about things that are outside of the city itself. And I hope there is more stuff to come that's outside of the city as well, and just what interesting and crazy things that could be going on out there, and new challenges that could be arise for Belle and the gang, and maybe other familiar members. And that is something that is also in the side story for Sword Princess as well. There is some stuff that happens outside the city, just for reference sake. But of course, they spend some time in this little town. Nothing really drastic really happens. It's more of a heartwarming component where it brings Hestia and Belle together because of the little argument they had beforehand, because Hestia is trying to sort of drill in this whole, well, what if someone confesses their feelings to you and they're a goddess? And Belle kind of knee-jerks at it and goes, well, I would just decline them, you know, a goddess is too good for me, they're above me, you know, they're there to be worshipped and not be in a romantic relationship. And I understand where Belle's coming from. You also got to realize that Belle just had Freya confess. Even though she didn't say it right to his face, she said it from a distance, so Belle is still in shock over those transpiring events. So he's still trying to recuperate from that big shock. And again, Freya is leaps and bounds above most of the goddesses, and Hestia is definitely a catch on her own, but Freya is just one of those that is worshipped even by gods themselves. So Belle is still very much in shock. At least that's how I see it. So Belle's just knee-jerking instantly when he hears that, and that upsets Hestia. And that is when it leads to Hestia doing something silly, which leads to her getting captured, taken out of the city, and then Eyes and Belle go chasing after it. And this allows them to come close. It allows them to kind of explain things from their own different perspectives, and Belle goes a lot into why he's so reluctant about things because of the past that he's gone through. He's scared that he's going to lose more people because, of course, he's lost his grandfather, which is, of course, we know who. I'm not going to say for anime fans, but if you want to know who it is, go read the light novels. But for those that have read the light novels, you'll know exactly who I'm referring to. That is a big revelation. That is someone that is key to the story itself, that is key to Belle's life, and obviously Belle is very sentimental and connected to that particular character. And so that allows Hestia and Belle to come together. Though I do really love the connections that happen between Belle and Eyes. There's a little bit more connections between them, and we don't really get many of those opportunities just because everyone's kind of jumping in between them, even though you can obviously see that they both have an interest for each other. Obviously one has a bigger interest than the other, but Hestia and the other individuals out there are always sort of blocking them from getting closer and closer and closer. So it's really nice when they get their moments to be together and actually have those heartwarming moments. But I wouldn't say anything drastically happens storytelling wise. It's more just development from a character standpoint, them coming together, them overcoming their own individual issues, and them ending up leaving the town itself after they join into a festival and have that fun, cute moment. And in the anime, it does a decent job at that. But they have those cute moments, and then they decide to go home back to the city itself. Now there's one last little bit at the end of this volume which would hint to the next volume or the next big major arc, and if this was in the anime, which it is, it hints at a major story arc that is to come. And with season 3 being announced, this very much just shows, well, now we're going to be going into that next big story arc, which again, I haven't read those light novels. I'm going to be reading them and reviewing them, but I have been told it's 3 volumes that cover one story arc, which is what a lot of anime fans are hoping season 3 is going to cover, that big story arc, and it's just going to flesh out those 3 volumes properly. I'm really hopeful of that. I'm really excited for that, because I know generally where it's going to go. So I'm super excited. And of course, I'll be reading and reviewing the light novels as I get them. I'll be picking up the pace to a point, though I'll take a little bit of a break, and then I'll start reading and reviewing them leading up to season 3. But of course, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. How hyped are you for season 3 of the anime? What were your favorite chapters in this? Who were your favorite characters? And just your overall thoughts, opinions about volume 8 and the anime and season 3. Just your overall thoughts and opinions are definitely welcome in the comment section down below. But if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more anime content, and I'll see you, beautiful nerds, in the next video.